joining us all, and sorry we're a little late getting to the event. So I don't even know who's our designated facilitator, Adriana. Is it Tori? All right, Tori, fire away.
We want to do round robins while we wait for Mike. He's coming.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that would be great if we do the first half hour of round robins. That'd be great.
Okay. Kim, do you want to start us with those?
Sure. Yeah. So we are working hard on a number of different fronts. One thing that we're making some progress on is a workforce development workshop series with CCMB, Circuit Rider, and Resilience Works. We're hoping that we could pull off 2 workshops between end of March and April. And the design would be something similar to what we did with the conference, the forest management conference that we hosted in June of 2023, where we'd have 3 different sites where the different participants will get a chance to learn some different aspects of how to implement fuel treatment. And we got some good feedback from each one of those partners to think about what types of things they really want to learn and benefit from. The other key thing that we're working on right now with Sonoma RCD, Fire Safe Sonoma, and Northern Sonoma County Fire District is a grant to the Community Wildfire Defense grant through U.S. Forest Service. We're looking at about a $6.5 million budget in an area that would focus on the eastern Sonoma County, also known as the Mayakama North and South. So we're working on that, trying to developing exactly what that would look like. So that's probably a good update for me.
All right, we'll go to someone online. How about super far away from the screen? Still is here, Chris. Oh, it moved. Carlson from Sonoma Land Trust.
Hey, good morning, folks. Get my thoughts together. I guess one thing we've been working on is we contracted with Taj Katuna, who just got his master's in forestry at Berkeley, to do a literature review on smoke taint and wine grapes, and some of the unknowns, knowns, and kind of implications for prescribed burning. So I'll have more to say about that in the next month or two. We did a couple out of permit season patch burns on some of our properties this winter. We were able to take advantage of that dry January we had in a couple spots before bird nesting season kicked in. And then also CAL FIRE didn't fully staff down this winter, so they've had extra resources available to help out with projects on properties where environmental compliance is taken care of. And I know that there's some discussion about CAL FIRE staying funded year-round across the state that's happening at the state level right now. So I just at least want to put that on our radar. They bring so much to the table, and it's a great opportunity to get projects done without getting grants, as long as kind of folks are set up beforehand with environmental compliance and CAL FIRE agreements. So certainly we'd be willing to if you had a landowner who is considering that sort of thing, acting as sharing our experience as a landowner, having those agreements with CAL FIRE, but maybe something with future discussion if they do pass that funding. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to Jason Mills.
Hey everybody, hey Tori. Yeah, we've been really busy, from floods to fires. So ecological solutions, we've been doing a lot of erosion control work in Mark West and Russian River area. And then we've also been busy with fuel reduction and invasive species control. Fuel reduction we're wrapping up 20 acres here in Mark West, private landowner. And it's been awesome. We got all the saw work done by the end of January before nesting season. Now we're piling it all up. And then we've been busy with the homeowners association in Santa Rosa, where we cut last year 7 acres of English ivy from climbing up the trees. Now we've gone back and we're hand pulling on the ground. So we got about 5 acres manually pulled of English ivy in the heart of Santa Rosa. And we're going to go back and do some additional forest thinning there. We got like 2,000 invasive trees out last year, mostly privet, acacia, and cotoneaster with a bunch of olives too. So now we're moving on to more firs and bays, and then we're going to be piling all that up where we don't have access to chip it, and we'll be burning it. That looks like in partnership with Santa Rosa, coming up in April. And then on our star thistle site, we bagged up 700 pounds of star thistle last summer. And then we just broadcasted 750,000 wildflower seeds in that star thistle treatment area. So that's going to be awesome to see this spring. Approaching broom season, so doing a workshop for the Coast Ridge Forest Council out there with Judy Rosales. Coming up next Friday on the 28th, we're going to have a volunteer broom pull followed by a presentation I'll do on some of the most common invasives in Sonoma. So lots going on, lots of great work, lots of opportunities, and thanks everybody.
Thanks, Jason. How about Jason Wells?
Howdy. So I was asked to talk about the forest health grant that we just put in. Do we want to do that later?
Yes, we will.
Okay. In that case, other stuff. What am I working on? I'm working on getting my life together again after putting in a giant forest health grant. Is really what I'm working on. So yeah, we've got forest management plans that we're trying to catch up right now. Individual management plans for landowners. We've got a group stewardship plan in the Bohemian corridor highway area that we're working on. And so yeah, just right back to planning and funding, trying to deal with programmatic planning and shifting around funds and thinking about how we move forward with uncertainty related to certain funds being frozen. So that's all I got.
Thank you. I think again, I'm super far away from the screen, so Kelly and Rodrigo, I think.
That's great.
Cool, thank you.
Hello. We're just working away. We're working on THPs right now for local landowners and some NTMPs. So we're getting a lot of private forest landowners that are wanting to do some thinning of their forests at this point, and looking forward to working with them and understanding their needs out in the field. We've also been working on, well, Rodrigo's been working primarily on the Western Cal VTP. So that's been a big project that we've been moving forward, and ERS has also been implementing the north side Russian River shaded fuel break in between raindrops. So we're working on those 3 ridge lines. And so we've been pretty busy and trying to close the books down for the year so that we can get our taxes done, all the things that small businesses have to do. And so we've been quite busy. So Rodrigo, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Rodrigo, I'm a new RPF. She kind of summarized a lot of what I've been doing, but sun's coming out, so we're going to be hitting the field pretty soon. Got some inventory and marking to do. Excited to do that.
Good, thank you, guys.
We'll go back to the room real fast. Patty, thanks.
I'm Patty Aaron in the Sonoma Resource Conservation District. We have 2 workshops coming up in March. On the first is a post-fire considerations. These are both on Zoom with Heather Morrison. And on the 15th is with Roxanne Foss, grazing and range management. So if you want more information, by all means, contact me. Thanks.
We'll come back to Zoom. How about Rachel Bean from Sonoma Ecology Center?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I'm with Sonoma Ecology Center and I represent our portion of the Resilient Landscapes Coalition, and we are gearing up to get our workshops rolling out on gardening in the defensible space zone and beyond. So we'll have some webinars coming up this year and some in-person site visits where we will evaluate defensible space work that has been completed and talk about what was done right, what could be improved on, and also assess areas that still need work performed and what could be done in those areas.
Awesome, thank you. Let's go to Ari DeMarco.
Hi, sorry. Hi, I'm Ari DeMarco with Sonoma RCD. I work as part of the forestry team there. So Jason and Patty kind of gave the updates for us, but yeah, just tuning in and happy to be here.
Sounds good. How about, oh, we're moving. People are moving again. Gary and Marjorie.
Just say it. Hi, so this is Gary Nickel and Marjorie Green, and we're parents of Colin Nickel. So the big thing happening is the workshop that's going to be coming this weekend at our place, and there's 50 people learning about forestry.
Thanks. Sorry, someone's trying to talk to me while I'm facilitating. Who haven't I done? Sophia, because I see you.
Hi, folks. I am Sophia. I work with the UC Cooperative Extension also in Marin County. I've been to many of your meetings, but as Gary and Marjorie had said, one of the big things we have upcoming with the group I work with is the Forestry Stewardship Workshop is going to have their field trip this weekend in Occidental on their property, and we thank them very much for hosting that. It's a beautiful piece of property. And then other than that, on forestry stewardship statewide, we're going to have another stewardship workshop upcoming, starting I think at the beginning of April. Our target is going to be Tuolumne County on that one. And then we have a post-fire that's workshop that's going on in Butte County. And then I think we're going to be doing it Plumas County next. So those are also open to other people if you want to just hop on, because they're mostly remote in Zoom and with dovetailed by field trips. And then we have coming up in April, a big thing is our tree school. One is going to be in Santa Cruz and one is going to be in Oakhurst. So if you are interested in either one of those, I can send you information if you would like to register or attend. I think we're already booked up with our speakers, but okay. And I think that's what I got hot, irons in the fire, I guess. Okay, thank you.
All right, welcome back to the room. Your name is Chris, right?
Brooke.
Sorry.
That's okay. Hey everyone, Brooke Edwards, Sonoma County Regional Parks, and we've been busy this winter with doing fuels reductions, building burn piles and burning them. Recently, we've been at work at our Foothill, Carrington, and Sonoma Valley, and this is really the second year that we've had a dedicated forestry and fuels reduction crew working out there in our parks. We have about 8 people on staff, and so we're getting a lot done out there. Of course, partnering with all of our partners, ACR, CAL FIRE, and whatnot. But this winter we've been busy with our burn piles. You guys also might have heard that there is a pending deal to add 1,500 acres to Monterey Redwoods Regional Park. So we're partnering with Save the Redwoods League on that. And if everything works out, that property would be transferred over to regional parks this summer. And a great opportunity for fuels reduction and redwood forest restoration type work. So 1,500 acres, all redwood forest, and it would connect in terms of recreational trails, Bohemian Highway, monorail, all the way out to and through state parks to the coast. So an incredible puzzle piece to all of that out on the coast. So looking forward to that and exciting acquisition.
I think Ag and Open Space had something to do with that.
Did you guys have something to do with that? You guys have something to do with everything. Yes, many other partners, Ag and Open Space definitely involved. I wasn't involved, you know, so Kim probably knows a whole lot more than I do. But thank you for your help on that. And then also, I'm part of a working group at the San Jose JC, trying to kind of reorganize, reframe their wildfire resilience program over there. And so that is a very successful program that's been run for 4 years now. And the funding was starting to dwindle and run out. And so a group of us that have been involved in the program got together. We developed a working group to figure out how we can better integrate what we call the WRP program into the JC curriculum. So what we've done is develop this wildfire resilience program into a class, NRM 145 stewardship practices in wildfire resilience. And so it's going to be both a class and a lab that students can take the first half of the day. And then the second half of the day would be students in shown forest and other properties, learning how to use chainsaws, do fuels reduction, build piles, burn them, and do broadcast burning. And so it's working on integrating it into the JC curriculum. One reason is that now the JC is able to get funding from the state to pay for an instructor for the program. But the other thing that we're looking at is we're reaching out to other nonprofit organizations and RCDs to see if they can help us run the internship side of things. And so that would involve soliciting grant money to help pay for some of the instructors, to help pay for a stipend for what the interns do. And then, so help solicit grants, distribute those grants, and kind of be that fiscal sponsor for this WRP program at the JC. And so we're in discussions with a number of different organizations. And that would really help kind of stand this program back up. Been very successful. It's had about 30 to 40 students already go through the program. Regional Parks has hired many folks from the program, state parks, and other local organizations. And so we're working on that as well. And excited to get that up and running. And like I said, reaching out to a number of different organizations. If you guys have any ideas on, how we can help this program to make sure that it's a strong workforce development program so that students get the skills they need and can move into a career field. We're all ears, and so any help that you can provide, we're interested in. That's it for me.
I have a question. Are any of the students involved on private land?
Well, that's one of the things that we're looking at is if we have a nonprofit organization that helps run the internship, that would free us up so we could work on other projects off of the JC lands. So it's kind of centered at Schoen Farm, but it could work on regional parks, it could work on private property, it could work on CAL FIRE projects. Obviously, SEEK would need to be covered. But then that kind of opens up the program to really work on other properties, other vegetation types, besides what we have at Schoen Farm.
But you had mentioned that there's been 30 students go through the program already. And so would they be directed or helped to work on private lands?
Well, the private lands, they would have to get a contractor, a private contractor, or get some funds to help pay for. the
But can we
students.
help them? Is there groups that can help that to happen, as it seems like it
Sure.
needs to be part of the program?
Yeah, if there were some kind of grant funded program that could then help pay for the interns to then go work on private property, that could work, as long as CEQA is covered.
Right, but after they're out of the program, that's what I'm wondering, is there any pathway for them to get opportunities to work on private lands? I mean, they're not asking the right question.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, the part of the program is they get to network with a number of different agencies and private contractors. And so that would kind of be the avenue where then they would work on.
So private
lands.
contractors could be on private lands, and saying the agencies could help too, but I'm just really interested in getting them as much as we can to work on private lands, because that's what we're about.
Absolutely.
I think one of the trajectories of this work is to think about a labor pipeline. And you have younger crews like the CCMVs and Resilience Works and circuit riders who have less experience, they're gaining experience as they're going through. But associating them with the state, thank you, Fred, state and regional parks, they're being able to grab some of those graduates to work on their programs, but also there's consultants or contractors who are also looking for other sources that might be able, but to go from the SRJC right into serving private landowners would be a stretch for them. They don't have that skill set yet. But I think once they get associated with these different groups, now the private contractors are excited about being able to grab some of these students who graduate from this program because they're already trained. And that's what
Right.
Brooke was
Well, I
talking
just hope
about.
that the groups encourage.
Yeah.
That, I think it not just encourage, but maybe become a, policy ABC.
Yeah.
Point one.
Right.
That be part of the program.
Yeah.
It's just, we've got to get to the private landowners
Yeah.
to help them. And then I was gonna ask if Fred is still engaged in the JC program.
He is, yeah.
Is he coming back? or-
You know, he has another appointment.
Okay.
Oh, he just dropped off the food.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I dropped off.
That's
That was
great.
my day.
Thank you.
But anyway, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we have time for one, maybe two more. So we'll jump back on line to Christopher, and I'm sorry, I can't read your last name, I'm too far away.
Yeah, those need to be.
That's fine. It's a difficult last name. Good morning, everyone. I'm Christopher Seche, so don't look at the way it's spelled because it's nothing the same as the way it's pronounced. I'm in Occidental on Coleman Valley Road, involved in 3 activities these days. But I should first say this is my first time to join one of your meetings, so I'm learning what goes on in these meetings. I had the pleasure of joining a party of this group, a holiday party. Thanks, Kelly, for being my sidekick at the party. And so out of the party, I said, okay, let's see, when they're not partying, what do they really do for serious work?
We party good too.
So we'll see what this is like. I may continue, I may come in and out. So I'm in Occidental again. I have a conservation easement of 50 acres on my 74 acres. And I have a Natural Resource Conservation Service grant that's now 4 years old for fuels reduction, forestry management. And last week, we were going to have a burn pile workshop, a public burn pile workshop with UCCE and circuit riders for the 50 burn piles that we have from last summer's work, but the atmospheric river closed that date down, and we have a backup date coming in March, and we've been advertising that workshop and have already people registered for that workshop that were relieved that they weren't asked to come out in the middle of the atmospheric river. And we will be working again one more summer on that grant, on the work here. And
Right.
that borders the Camp Meeker St. Dorothy's land on our north side. And you probably all know about that new transfer from St. Dorothy's to Camp Meeker Park and Rec Department of that redwood forest. And there's lots of work already going on right now there. And there's going to be more work going on there if Jason Wells has all the duckies lined up well. So that's one thing. Another thing, I'm involved with the Bohemia Collaborative Steering Committee, and we're involved in a number of activities, and we're now planning out. We just had our steering committee meeting. We're planning out our next quarterly stakeholder meeting. And then the third thing I'm involved with is Bodega Land Trust and Tannery Creek Reserve. And we're planning out a neighborhood community meeting around that conservation easement. If you know the Tannery Creek Reserve in Occidental. Okay, that's enough for me. Thank you.
Well, that's great.
Thanks, Christopher. And then we're gonna bounce to Robert Aguero, and while Robert's talking, maybe Mike wants to get his presentation. I don't know where it needs to go, but. Mike
Yeah,
has to
give
get
me
the presentation up.
USB. Yeah, perfect.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Robert Aguero. I'm a forester and the interim grants program manager here at Permit Sonoma. Our grants team manages 4 federally funded FEMA wildfire mitigation grants, totaling about $60 million. So the most recent news is as of yesterday, we just closed out the planning phases for 2 defensible space home hardening grants. So those are now going to go back to FEMA for them to review and hopefully get implementation money dispersed as soon as they can complete their environmental review. We have our hazardous fuels reduction grant, which is more shaded fuel break roadside type work that FEMA is currently reviewing, and that'll result in about $4.5 million in implementation funds once that gets dispersed. And so now we're mainly working on our big brick wildfire resilient Sonoma County grant in the planning phase of that right now. Otherwise, working with planners and the public on implementation of our county's tree ordinance and oak woodland ordinance, which has been very fruitful and a good experience so far since those were adopted last year, and then assisting other folks with CEQA compliance for vegetation management, permitting assistance for forestry type projects here at the county. So yeah, busy over here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robert.
All right, we're at the 11:30 mark, so do we want to move on to our presenter?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Can I just mention something that we got some snacks, some gluten-free snacks? And I'm gonna help, I'm doing good snacks. I have a lot of snacks. Guys, come on over, you know.
So yeah, today we have Dr. Michael Jones from UC Cooperative Extension here to talk to us about Mediterranean oak and other forest pests or oak pests. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike. And yeah.
Thanks, Tori. Do you want me to be on the mouse or do you want me to?
Yes, I can hear you the mouse.
Okay, that way people online can see me randomly pointing at things.
Oh, I was gonna pass them around the bed.
Okay. So, yeah, thanks y'all. Good morning. Thanks for having me here. Tori asked if I could talk about forest health issues. We need many hours if I was gonna do all forest health, so I focused down on oak woodland issues, oak pests. And then in particular, since this is a more recent invasive species and one of concern, I'm gonna focus on Mediterranean oak borer. And then talk about some of the other insects that we see kind of in this space that can look like Mediterranean oak borer and that are pretty common in our oak woodlands. So here we go. All right, so the insect is called mob. We're lazy, mob, or the mouthful. It's a xylem. This is these. It's ambrosia beetle. Ambrosia beetles are pretty cool. They're kind of like a subset of bark beetles. And with ambrosia beetles, instead of having internal digestion like typical bark beetle species, these have external digestion where they farm a symbiotic fungi that they colonize in their host trees. And then they actually eat the fungus, which is decaying the complex carbohydrates like lignin and cellulose that the bark beetles are feeding on. So as you can see, here's the insect. They're very small. Ambrosia beetles are tiny. So we'll talk about hiking moths, but it's only 3 millimeters long. This is a female. And then the black in this branch, these are the galleries or the feeding tunnels, and the black is the fungi. So right, that's a very common, well, I mean, that's true of all ambrosia beetles. You'll see this very characteristic black staining of the galleries because it's their farmed fungi. What's interesting about these symbiotic fungi, we call them ambrosia fungi, is that it's not very beneficial to have a symbiotic fungi that's very virulent, right? Because that means it can kill the host tree pretty quickly. So typically these are very generally non-aggressive or pathogenic fungi. But every once in a while, because these little ambrosia beetles have these little pharangium where they carry fungi with them, they'll pick up hitchhikers. And those can be really virulent sometimes. And so we can see some really interesting relationships between native ambrosia beetles picking up invasive fungi or invasive ambrosia beetles introducing invasive fungi. They can cause some serious ecological challenges, like, for example, in the southeast, red bay ambrosia wilt, or red bay wilt, which is caused by an ambrosia beetle. For this particular species of mob, what we're concerned about is that its primary hosts in California are the white oaks. So valley oak, especially blue oak and Oregon white oak. And then we've seen opportunistic feeding in California black oak as well. And just to get back real quick, this symbiotic fungi, its primary fungi that we found, Raphaelia montii, has been shown to be fairly pathogenic in other we call pest disease complexes. So far, we're still really trying to understand its role in the mob's infestation and its impact in white oaks. It does seem to have some pathogenic capacity, which is it's pretty significant. All right, so just because this is really new detection, right? We first detected it in 2019. So in terms of invasive species, that's like yesterday. So first found in northern Napa Valley, Calistoga area in 2019. Already at that point, based on reconstruction of the infestation, looking at dead trees and finding galleries and evidence of callousing and kind of the trees responding, we figured it had already been here for 5 or 10 years, probably not, if not longer. So through continued delimitation and monitoring, right, when we first found it, CDFA got involved, so it was a pretty big effort. Forest Service, CAL FIRE, we're all on board with this particular pest. We were able to do some really aggressive delimitation or trapping efforts to understand the infestation. By 2021, we see that it's pretty well established throughout Napa County, but also really well established in Sonoma, in Southern Lake County, and then we find a satellite infestation in Sacramento. By 23, we're just seeing basically doubling in the size of the known area of infestation. I want to be really clear that this is not expansion of the infestation. This is still catching up to where it's already established, right? We're way behind the ball on detection. That's very common with invasive species. They go undetected for quite a long time. So we're not seeing, this is not natural dispersal. This is us just realizing like a lot of these issues we've been seeing are actually related to this particular insect.
Any sense of how it was introduced?
Yeah, actually we have a pretty good idea. So called Mediterranean newport, from the Mediterranean region of Europe, right? France, all the countries along the Mediterranean in southern Europe. Where we found it was outside, and this is a lot of speculation and anecdotal evidence, but where we found it was outside a cooperage in Napa, in Calistoga, in Napa County, that imports French oak. And in its native range, mob is a pest of primarily of cork oak, interesting, but it has a pretty diverse host range. And the oaks used for French oak, the species, there's 3 or 4, are hosts as well. So we highly suspect that it was introduced as, you know, in staves for wine barrel making. And then it's a pretty capable flyer, but we also see through fuels reduction projects, post-fire or post-disturbance emergency projects, utility right-of-ways, and basically every time we're managing for hazards, we see pretty dramatic dispersals occurring because people move infested wood out of the known infestation. So either that's through firewood collection or moving large amounts of wood from these hazard reduction projects. Okay. So by 2024, we see again the known area of infestation doubling, and then we add 4 more counties now away from permanent Mendocino County. It's in Yolo County, which isn't surprising. It was kind of in that Sacramento County area for a while. It's really ripping, as you can see, you know, in this kind of pinkish color, it's just ripping through basically those riparian corridors in Sacramento and Yolo County along the river corridors and the kind of the floodplains, but they're just dominated by valley oaks. It's just running through those. A lot of this, I think, is actual dispersal that we're seeing from the insect. But yeah, so 4 more counties, El Dorado as well, so it's moving in the foothills, and then Solano, so it's kind of spreading out of Napa and into the Central Valley. At the same time, they had another introduction in Oregon. Genetics suggests this was a separate introduction from actually a different region of the invaded range in Europe. So it is an invasive insect in Europe as well, right? It's not just a native pest, it also is spreading to other regions. And again, particularly tied to the water. And so new introduction in Oregon. What's interesting about, and maybe not surprising, is the primary host they're seeing is Oregon white oak. So Oregon's just if you're following forest health issues in Oregon, they have emerald ash borer well established, and it's all in this area. So they have this ridiculously aggressive campaign to kind of suppress and control these outbreaks. But they've got, well, they're dealing with a lot more than we are, and we'll be there soon, right? Emerald ash borer, spotted lanternfly, all those things are going to show up here eventually. Okay, so they're dealing with a separate infestation as well in Oregon. So let's talk about the insects. I don't expect all of you will be out there. Maybe some of your clientele will be asking this, or you'll be looking for these signs of infestation and identifying this particular insect. So we'll talk a little bit about ID. It's pretty easy once we get into it. But I'm not expecting you all to be entomologists by the end of this. So the female is larger than the male. This is pretty typical of the insect world. She's also the most important pair of the sexes. The males really don't do much, so you're very likely never going to see them. They kind of just hang out in their host tree, will mate with their sisters or crawl around the stem and mate with siblings and relatives, and then that's it. But the females they do the bulk of the work, right? They're the ones flying, they're the ones colonizing trees. And as you can see, their sex ratio is pretty skewed, where it's predominantly females, 10 to 30 females for every male. The males are about 2 millimeters. We're finding multiple generations. This is really important. Typically, you think of tree insects completing 1 or 2 generations per year, so it's pretty easy to track their phenology, right? Because you know exactly when there's gonna be larvae in the tree, when the adults are flying, when that cycle kind of completes, and it helps you with management. With these particular insects, we find every single life stage throughout every part of the year, and multiple generations just hanging out, and they just wait for opportunistic time, typically environmental conditions to emerge, right? So if it's like right now, typically insects are not very active this time of year, but for for Mediterranean oak borer, if it's above 70 degrees, they're flying right now, which is unusual. So it makes management really challenging because they can fly any time of year. But they're pretty cool, right? They're bark beetles that, pretty characteristic shape. And I think they're pretty fascinating and interesting. This is just, don't worry too much again here, but this is to point out that just because you see the tiny little brown beetles popping out of oak trees, valley oaks, doesn't mean that it's mob, right? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of insects that feed on oak trees. A lot of them look like little bark beetles. Some of them are little bark beetles, like Pseudopodiopterus pupipennis is western oak bark beetle, which is a native bark beetle, and then there's other insects on there that all feed in oaks and we find in trapping. So again, right, if you see bark beetle, little tiny brown beetles coming in our trees, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have mob. That's just it's kind of like a asterisk in this conversation. When we talk about ID, again, they're very typical of the bark beetle morphology. If you've ever really sat down and looked at that, where they're just elongate, they have parallel sides, meaning they're kind of straight, not weird round shapes or anything like that. They have a flattened declivity. In layman's terms, that means they have a flat butt, right? This is the declivity. This is their elytra, which is their wing coverings, right? So under this hard casing is their flight wings. This is a hardened sclerotized protection. Imagine if you're burrowing through a tree, having very sensitive venous wings exposed to hard wood would mean you tear them up. So this is the way to protect them for burrowing in wood. But what's unique about this is that for ambrosia beetles, they typically have very flat butts, or it's rounded, so it's a pretty good way for identifying. And then the big one is these paired tubercles that are particularly large. So basically tubercles are these little horns or little bumps. So what's great about this is that if you see a 3 millimeter brown beetle with a flat butt and these 4 horns in this pattern, that's mob. We actually identify small bark beetles and ambrosia beetles based on this pattern of kind of projections on their butts, right? So for example, there's like the 5-spine California ips and other things like that. So when you see, and you can see this with the naked eye if you can pull it up, this is a pretty clear pattern. So this is a very easy way to do identification. You can see from this profile that, you can see this projections pretty good, and they're paired. So this is a pretty big thing that we rely on for ID. Of course, we're also setting in for genetics, but when we see this, no other ambrosia beetles in California have this pattern. So what do infestations look like? Well, part of what makes detecting invasive insects so challenging is that early incipient stages of infestation or colonization of the host tree are pretty standard across native invasive insects, across diseases or insect pests, right? And it's canopy decline. The first time we really recognize that something's wrong with the tree is because the canopy starts fading, dying back, or changing color, getting chlorotic or necrotic. What's unique, I guess, maybe is the pattern we're still trying to tease out from mob is that it appears to start colonizing one large upper branch. So in this, photo, what you see is the rest of this canopy looks good for this tree, except for this one part that's all tied to this one branch. So, that's kind of a unique pattern, but we're still teasing out if that's reliable or not. And as they colonize this branch, they emerge, they keep moving down, 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 and then eventually they'll move to the main stem, and that's what ultimately will result in mortality. They'll drop branches, right? Because we'll go to galleries in a second, but that gallery goes into the sapwood, right? So it structurally weakens branches, and they tend to fail under wind and rain, and just from weight. But then really advanced canopy infestations, you really see, and you can even see the stages of decline. Like this is from that tree, still relatively green. This is dead because it's brown, but these are chlorotic. So you see the kind of progression of decline in the canopy. Once the canopy is pretty much dead, this 99% dead tree, then we see them moving into the main stem. And this was kind of amazing about this particular pest is, right, remember 3 millimeter beetle. Typically, ambrosia beetles feed in the upper canopy where the branches are smaller and thinner bark because it's easier for them to colonize. But mob will attack the main stem of 6-foot plus diameter valley oaks. And so that's really kind of what we're seeing aggressively is that mob is killing these large urban street trees and these urban kind of park trees. So once you get to this stage, you can see, it's kind of hard to tell, but all this really fine kind of wood dust, that's boring dust from the beetles, right? So that's them kicking as the female is colonizing, right? She is burrowing into the tree. She needs to create space to colonize the fungus and to lay her eggs. So she's physically like kicking the sawdust out as she's chewing on the tree. And sometimes because of these entry wounds, you can get staining on the stem as well. So this is, when you see the entire stem of a large valley oak covered in this really fine powdery flour-like boring dust, and it's caught up in the cobwebs and the lichens and mosses, there's not really anything else that will cause that. And just because we see exit holes also, again, right, we're talking about a large diversity of insects that attack oaks. So really paying attention to the shape of the entry or exit hole is really important too. Isn't too much worried to focus on, but for ambrosia beetles, because they're really small, we're looking for tiny little round holes, which are almost impossible to see in this really complex bark architecture. But if you see other types of hole shapes, you see a D-shaped exit hole on an oak, then we have serious problems, right? Because that's another invasive insect. But a lot of the other ones are caused by native insects. So again, there's paying attention to these kinds of signs of infestation are really important to helping confirm mob or other types of forest health issues.
Sorry, which was the hole that you would know is from the mob?
So I would say this one is for Squalidae, which is like the larger genus or family for bark beetles. It's these tiny little round holes.
Okay.
Right.
Hey, that what your cursor or that would be really helpful if you had that like printed out on like a little index card or something.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. I wonder if
I can do that. This is
you
from
can make something like that happen.
I can do that. This is the table that we put together for the fiddle or the forest pest alert for gold spotted oak borer. So I can definitely pull that and print this on little laminated cards and hand them out.
Yeah, if that was like an index card size laminated card, that'd be really nice to have. And you know, we could be giving that out to arborists. We could be giving that out to people who look at trees. And
cool.
That'd be really helpful.
Great idea. Yeah, I'll modify it a little bit, but that's a great idea. I'll get on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So here's the next and kind of sign is the galleries, right? These feeding tunnels. Of course, they're going to be colonized with ambrosia fungi, so they're going to be black stained. What's unusual about mob from other ambrosia beetles is typically ambrosia beetles are very territorial. So if they like come across each other, they'll like stop, fight, and then turn around and go away, right? But with mob, the galleries overlap in the same plane and form like trellising patterns. I don't know. That's a nuanced kind of element unless you're looking at lots and lots of trees and ambrosia beetle galleries, it's not something necessarily you see. But it looks very much like this, where there is more overlapping and more interaction between, as you can see, here's the entry point, than other ambrosia beetles, because there's quite a few native ambrosia beetles that feed and stress trees as well. But then when you look at kind of this is peeling the bark back, you just see this buckshot pattern. They're all in the same line again, remember, because they're kind of feeding the same plane, so they form these like lines that is unusual as well. And then here you can see that the feeding goes to the edge of the heartwood, right? It doesn't really expand in the heartwood. That's waste material. It's not usually a lot of really viable nutrients in that space, so they're primarily feeding in that sapwood. But you know, this was like a 4-foot diameter tree, so that's like 6 inches of feeding into the sapwood, and all the black lines in the galleries. So if you see, black galleries, if a tree still has green canopy and you see black galleries like up valley oak, that's a pretty good indication that maybe mob is in that tree, right? You need to like reach out to myself for a CAL FIRE. So, what are we doing for management? Like I said, this is still brand new detection. So as far as I'm concerned, we know basically nothing about it. We're doing the best we can, but we still really know little. So the big effort right now is really monitoring. Where is it? Where is it spreading to? How fast is it spreading? Can we develop tools like using remote sensing data to find incipient infestations? I can tell you from experience with working on a lot of forest pests that this effort has been a challenge. We're still working on it. And so one of the questions we still have that we're doing research on is can it attack healthy trees? And that's a really complicated question.
Can it do what?
Can it attack healthy trees?
Healthy.
And that's a complicated question, because in the urban environment, arguably, there's probably not a single healthy tree in the urban forest, right? They have just unusually weird stress patterns. People do horrible things with those trees. They just experience stressors that trees in the wildlands don't experience. So they're probably mostly all stress. And so the question is, what level of stress triggers an infestation? Can they attack healthier trees? We're trying to figure all that out. But because we're not sure yet, what we're hypothesizing and kind of moving with for our recommendations is the best way to protect against mob is to improve the health of the vigor of a tree, right? So if that means supplemental watering in the shoulder seasons to kind of give it that boost, adding mulch, reducing competition, thinning stands, pruning trees back, all these things kind of improve the vigor that we need to help these trees have their immune systems, if you will, kind of help suppress infestations. A big one is obviously not moving firewood, and that's much more challenging, right? Because like I said, so for example, in the time where right after this, we found this insect, the glass fire happened in Napa County, right? And now there's this huge hazard tree removal effort. Napa County doesn't have any of the parcel zoning that allow all these tree care companies to dump large amounts of green waste, so they had to move them out of county. And so where we see is these movements of material coming out of the known area of infestation, going to Sonoma County and the Windsor area, or going even further like in Redding. And so we see these satellite infestations popping up because of this long distance movement of green waste. So it's also like not just picking up cut wood off the side of the road, but it's also changing policies around how do we process green material in situ, or creating spaces to kind of consolidate. Because with confidence, I can say everywhere we've known that mob infested oak has gone to, infestations have established.
Does the industry, the firewood industry, need to be educated about that don't move firewood?
Yeah,
I wonder how that's going.
Yeah, so this don'tmovefirewood.org is this statewide effort that we have with the Nature Conservancy, CAL FIRE, and UC Extension Fire Task Force. That basically the whole job is outreach education on. That's the tool we have. There's no regulations really in place. There's no policy that enforces sanitization or good management practices. It's really about education to get people to have better practice. We don't have a strong firewood market up here for gold spot oak borer in Southern California. Yeah, that's a huge issue. Is big commercial firewood production. Where we're seeing here is hazard tree projects, moving large amounts of infested wood, and then them also leaving large wood on the side of the road for people to process, and then they pick it up in small loads. Right. So it's getting small wood users to kind of understand the risks, getting tree care companies to understand the risk, which is the huge initial effort support option was to arborists and people doing this work, PG&E, a lot of the companies that were responsible for a lot of this material being moved around. But again, right, if there's larger social political challenges that have kind of inhibited this effort.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I said it, there's no quarantine. Basically, CDFA, the Department of Food and Agriculture, ranks mob as a B-rated pest, which means that it doesn't actually pose a significant economic risk. And that's the only mechanism we have for quarantine. And the only other tool we have is to establish a CAL FIRE zone of infestation, which they haven't done yet, and we may never, I don't know at this point. But the point is that this is all based on like people's best interest and not spreading invasive insect. There's no regulatory pathway at this point to control this insect. The best thing to do is destroy the material on site, right? Chipping to 1 inch size will work. Is sanitation pruning an option? Well, we're still trying to figure that out. How far, if it's a more pathogenic symbiotic fungi, how far does it transfer through the woody material beyond the galleries? And how far does that mean we have to prune below a known infested area? We're still figuring that out. Burning and chipping, that's our biggest kind of mechanisms right now. We tried polarization, it's extremely difficult, it doesn't work very well. And then the next big question we're trying to understand is chemical control. There's been a lot of research on another very similar species called the invasive shothole borers. So we know that probably a fungicide plus a systemic chemical injected systemically, or a combination of a stem application or an injection is going to be an important tool. But we're just getting to that research right now to understand kind of its role.
Are you seeing more of a prevalence of the tax in urban forests, or are you seeing it in natural forests as well?
It's most obvious in the urban spaces where, like Windsor, for example, right? It's a really great example. Their entire urban forest is dominated by these 4 foot plus diameter valio. You're getting hammered. It's really obvious because when you have the whatever they call the green park in the middle, and have all those valio, when they start dying, those big trees dying is really obvious.
Yeah.
So we know that it's rapidly spreading through urban spaces. In our research plots, we can just watch it kind of progress. It's not like a wave, it kind of hops around, but we can just see it moving through these kind of riparian corridors and zones where there's lots of value. It can just kind of slowly chipping away and killing them. In the wildlands, we have sites like at Boat Bay and things like that where we're looking and studying and we see it there, but it's not, maybe because there's less, it's not as high, it's not a density driven kind of outbreak where, you know, you have a monoculture of a host tree, it spreads pretty quickly because you got exponential population growth from the beetles, but where it's more mixed with other oak species, it seems to be going a little slower.
Okay.
But we're still, it's like I said, it's hard to catch it early on. We're really not seeing it till like trees are already dying, you know.
Right.
Guys been here for a minute.
And you're still, it's not clear about whether the trees are under stress or whether they are bombarded by a local neighbor who's
Yeah.
dead, right?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is proximity to infested trees is gonna be a factor too.
Right.
Don't think they have the mass attack, you know, that's a very, like, if you all know mass attacking, where it's just like the population's overwhelmed to defend the tree. That's pretty common in conifer specific bark beetles. I don't think that's happening in this particular outbreak dynamics. But, you know, if you have a stressed tree that's heavily colonized, it's likely your neighbor's stressed too,
Right.
and they're gonna very
Yeah,
easily
that makes sense.
spread to those neighboring trees. All things we're still trying to figure out, and you know, that it kind of, it seems like it's more like just taking advantage of stressed trees, which is ideally the best case scenario, right? If it's like emerald ash borer, where it just is wiping out, causing functional extinction of ash trees, that's very different than it's just targeting older, heavily stressed value, and then it might just not be a big deal in wildland areas where they're healthier. Well, I mean, but the problem is, right, there's not much value of habitat left, there's not many value oaks left, they're all in urban spaces. So there's all kinds of complexities about long-term outbreak dynamics. Okay, with the few minutes I got left, how much time do I have here?
You're doing good, you got it.
You got lots of time.
Oh, really? Okay, is there any questions specifically on mob? I'm gonna go to other oak pests that kind of look like mob or kind of are common things that I see in the urban forest space.
Mike, could I ask a question on predation? Or I don't know if you covered that, if I missed it. Are there predators out there for these invasive beetles?
Well, typically not, right? Because the predator-prey cycles are coevolution between, you know, the food and the predator. That's where biocontrol comes in, though we don't know of any biological control agents. So biocontrol is where you intentionally introduce predators of an invasive pest that co-occur within the same range, right? So you take a wasp or something that feeds on the beetle that occurs in Europe, and you intentionally introduce it here as a control mechanism. We haven't done biocontrol research yet. I don't see a lot of predation in these trees. Woodpeckers are predation, right? They'll peck the trees and eat the larvae and stuff out. We're still studying, sometimes with the fungicide, if you kill the fungicide, you can really affect the beetle's fecundity and survival. Sometimes you can use other fungi that are more aggressive, but not as virulent, which I don't know if that makes sense. But they can outcompete the symbiotic fungi. So there's lots of options on how to kind of think about controls in this space. But we don't have any real understanding of those mechanisms at this time.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay, let's go on and talk about more depressing things. All right, so these are not, this particular list, right, like I said, there's hundreds and hundreds of common oak pests that we look at. These are more of the ones that I kind of have gotten questions about in relationship to mob. People saying, hey, what's wrong with my trade thing is mob, and you're like, actually, it's this. So that's what we're gonna cover. So big one we see is Western oak bark beetle. Super tiny, super cute. It's a true bark beetle, not an ambrosia beetle. It feeds on a lot of different oak species. What's really interesting about Western oak bark beetle is native. And so really we only see this popping up during periods of high stress for oak trees. And so every time we have a really pronounced drought or extended drought, I'll see little pockets of mortality where wob, we call it wob, Western oak bark beetle, population will build up and it kills a couple trees, but as soon as the rain comes back or something else happens, it kind of lays back down. Every time we have some kind of stress, they're there, they pop up. The trick with Western oak bark beetle is it's picked up this invasive canker or fungi called Geosmithia pallida, which is called foamy bark canker. And in the center photo, this is a California black oak. Each one of these black staining areas is where a Western oak bark beetle female has done an exploratory tunnel where she just kind of burrows into the cambium and goes, actually, you know what? No, not a good ideal host. But she's inoculated with this Geosmithia that then causes cankers, and in this particular tree was dying because it had cankers like this all the way around. So it just kind of, even though it wasn't colonized by the beetle, it inoculated it with the pathogen that ultimately ended up killing it. But again, right, these are under drought stress conditions too, so it's not just like by itself that is bob and foamy bark canker able to kill the trees. It's when they're already heavily stressed because of drought or other distressors in the environment. It's got its name. It's really hard to show to see in these photos, but it's called foamy bark canker if you've ever seen it, because the sap foams out of the entry holes, and so it looks like foamy pitches coming out on the trees. It's pretty noticeable when you see it on trees. Armillaria is a big one. I'm sure you all know about armillaria, oak root rot, multiple species. Malaya is the most common one. We see this flaring up anytime that we have warm, wet conditions. So with the rains we've had the last few years, it's been ideal conditions for soil-borne pathogens. Again, a wide range of hosts and move from hardwoods to conifers back and forth. It's not an aggressive pathogen. It's in every single system in California. There's, I don't know, probably in North America, there's armillaria, right? It's just there. But what we see is that in urban spaces where people water oaks in the summer, where we see conversion to orchards and vineyards and then back to forests, we see those are flare-up spots where armillaria just thrives and really hits trees hard. Oaks are adapted to having relatively dry soils, and that suppresses the growth of their native soil-borne pathogens. So when we have wet soils in the summer, warm conditions, that's when armillaria and other oak root pathogens, or excuse me, other root pathogens thrive, and that's where we see really significant challenges. And you always know it's armillaria because at first it produces the honey mushrooms. This is on the tree, but usually they're like a fairy ring around the tree. And then the tree fails because oak, what it does is it just, the fungi just rots the roots and the architecture and the structural integrity until that tree just like heaves in wet soils under wind. So having no root ball when the tree fails is very common in armillaria. So is this white mycelial fan that grows in the cambium, and then the rhizomorphs, another name for this is the shoestring fungi. These really dense, drought-tolerant rhizomorphs are pretty characteristic. So the big one here is, you know, like I said, improving the vigor of trees. Like, don't water your trees in the middle of the summer, or like don't plant your lawn around them. Right, that's pretty common stuff when we're thinking about dealing with our oaks that are resilient to our kind of Mediterranean climate. Branch dieback. So, you know, a lot of things cause branch dieback. Diplodia is a pretty common one. And we get questions about this from mob because, you know, a big branch will die back. And it's because the big canker establishes in that branch. They think it's mob, but it's really just kind of a typical native pathogen that affects a lot of our native, also introduced oaks. Again, not a serious pest. If you haven't noticed, what I include here is what are the host species, common signs, should be signs, not symptoms, and then our typical management strategies. And a lot of the native pests, it's like, don't do anything because it's native and it's just responding to environmental stressors, whereas the invasives, that's where we kind of think differently about it. Again, you know, a pathogen that spreads well in warm conditions. So warm springs really trigger aggressive branch dieback. And I don't know, I'm sure some people noticed it, but a few years ago when we had a wet, warm spring, even last year, I saw lots of like little balls of brown foliage on oaks, and that's usually diplodia, or this next one, cryptocline, discula, where it just causes a little dieback at the branch tips. But the tree grows out of it and it's usually fine. So this is twig blight. So the previous one was affecting larger branches. Cryptocline usually infects twigs and petioles, right? So you see kind of just clumps of dead foliage. We've all seen this, right? This is super common on trees. This is a really, you know, this is a really incredible, for me, it was like kind of the most aggressive cryptocline infestation or infection I've ever seen. But I came back a year later and this coast live oak was fine. So even that amount of kind of defoliation, really isn't too much for the trees. Okay, cool. Yeah, there's a note on fungicide. This is from some old literature, and they recommended mixing like a fungicide with the diesel and then doing a foliar spray. That's from like the 1930s. So we really don't have any kind of recommendations for chemicals, but hey, you know, if people are really worried about it, there's options. Soil oak death, you know, again, this is invasive. I think we all know about this, so I don't need to spend a ton of time on this. This is primarily in the red oaks and the intermediate oaks. Intermediate oak would be canyon live oak. An aggressive pathogen. It's a Phytophthora. I should just change this to a slide of Phytophthora. There are lots of Phytophthora in California now. Remorm is not even my biggest concern at this point. It's very limited in its host range. It's things like Cinnamomi or Cactorum or Pseudoserene that I'm really concerned about, because Cinnamomi has a host list of over 1,000 species. Just in North America alone. Around the world, it's thousands of species. So Phytophthora is a big deal. A lot of them are invasive, some of them are native. We actually don't really have a good idea yet. But the point is, they're water molts. They're pretty cool. Be great. Just to talk about Phytophthora for a whole talk. They have swimming spores. They have these drought-tolerant clematis-spores. They do really cool things. But they thrive in our kind of climate with our cool, wet, warm springs and falls. And they have quite a large host range, so they're a pretty significant pest or issue. What's I think important here is for sod attacks red intermediate, mob attacks the white oaks. And I'll talk about GSOP in a little bit, but between those three, we have an invasive organism that is a serious pest of all of our native California oaks. I think that's the big takeaway. Is there isn't a single species of native oak in California that does not have some type of very aggressive invasive pest attacking it. Okay, cool. I'll leave all this. I'm not gonna go. This is a lot of information, but it's a lot. I think it's a lot of the same strategies, right? Don't move infested material. You know, improve the vigor. Is chemicals an option? Maybe, maybe not. Is there a warranty? How do we kind of manage these really aggressive invasive pests?
Can you describe the sod blitz? And is that still pretty relevant?
Absolutely, yeah. That's the only really mechanism we have that's tracking the kind of persistence and distribution of sod in California is through Berkeley, through Gabriello Mateo's lab. It's called the Sod Blitz. It's a community science program where groups sign up, they get sampling kits, they go out and collect samples of host material, so bay or tan oak, or mostly bay or tan oak, because they're the easiest to identify and the easiest to sample from. And then they send them back to the lab. Mateo's lab does the DNA analysis, and he then adds it to this map that they maintain, this one right here, letting us know where all the new zones of infestation, or where all the new infestations are. What this map, there's now 3 strains, just real quick. Del Norte for a long time was uninfected, had no known sod infestations, and then there was like an Southern Oregon infestation. Now Del Norte is infested with a different strain than the rest of the infestation, and then there's a third, so there's an NA1, NA2, and EU1. So there's 3 strains of sod. They all have different virulence, they all have different aggressiveness. We now have a connection between what was EU1 and our NA1 strain. And so the concern is that as EU1 and NA2 start to spread through the rest of the range that is suitable for sod, since they're more aggressive, we might see a renewed kind of big die-off event. It's very hypothetical at this point, but it's very much a possibility that we could see another resurgence of like significant and true mortality.
Go ahead.
Have we found any strains of tan oak that are resistant, and is prescribed fire at all helpful?
There is an effort. The Forest Service has a big effort with a lot of invasive insects and diseases to find genetic resistance, and so we do have a pretty widespread effort to collect genetics from across the range of these host species and try to find that genetic resistance. As far as I know, we haven't found it yet. Prescribed fire has a very short-term impact on sod. The direct mechanism of fire kills the pathogen, and it also kills the host material that's harboring the pathogen and can sporulate. The problem is that the disease persists in the green islands, and as soon as you have green up in the burn footprints, at least what we saw in research in wildfires and Santa Cruz is that as soon as you get green up, it spreads back into that area that was previously kind of removed from. So fire is probably not. I don't want to say that. Fire's gonna have a role. I think it's gonna play an important role in managing stand density and helping to like give you those trees apart so that we can kind of slow the rate of spread. Yeah. But it's not a mechanism for eradicating infestations. There is no mechanism for except for methyl bromide and cutting down every single host, right? So it's like just completely sanitizing forest soils and all the water and all the trees. So we're not talking about eradication. I think at this point, what we're really trying to do is slow the spread, and that means managing host densities, sanitation, BMPs that kind of mitigate the spread of the pathogen, and maintaining vigor.
You've got like 5 minutes.
Okay, did you have a question? Okay. Just another, these are things that pop up. If you look at the forest pest conditions report, things like oakworm and girdlers and tent caterpillars, they pop up and cause dieback and decline. So there's a long list of pests here that every once in a while will cause issues. One of my favorites is the oak pit scale. These are scales, but you can see these little donuts. They cause swelling, so they have little pits in the branches, and they can be pretty significant defoliation. But the point is that different environmental conditions and patterns in environmental conditions will create outbreak dynamics that shift for different species. This was a fun one a couple of years ago. The two-horned oak gall wasp. People, all of a sudden in the winter, which was unusual, live oak started to fade out, particularly most live oak. And basically what it was is these really awesome galls. They call them two-horned oak gall because the gall has these two little double horn looking things. And basically just this huge infestation caused a bunch of foliar dieback. I was monitoring phenology. All of a sudden, they all disappeared. And the next year, the trees were all fine. I looked at the literature. This happens every once in a while that this gall wasp that just exists somewhere in nature will outbreak. It'll, after a year or two, it'll collapse and then it'll come back whenever it feels like it. So sometimes things that look, people were really like, this was really concerning a lot of people because it was defoliating almost 100% coast live oaks. And the foliage was looking like this, which I'd be really concerned about too. But by the next year, the trees would look fine. Oak galls, I know you all know about this, but there's hundreds of them. They're really cool. Not a serious forest health issue, just kind of insects out there. Doesn't really mean much. Co-evolution. Acorn pests. I don't have enough time to talk about these, but we see on good mast years and good moisture years of proliferation of acorn pests. The filbert worms and weevils are always around with the acorns around. Drippy nut, which is a bacterial infection that establishes when the insects are colonizing, causes some decline in mortality. I guess mortality would be the right term for the acorns. Sometimes you get really bad outbreaks and you see significant impacts on the crop, the acorn crop. Sometimes it just kind of is tree to tree. But fire is a really important tool in this disease pest complex. And with fire, we see the prevalence of acorn pests dropping, frequent low intensity fire return intervals. We see acorn pest outbreaks, less than 30%. But currently, without fire in these systems, we have 70+% infestation and infection rates in our acorns. So fire is a really important part of this ecology. I did a really fun project with KQED. This is a plug. They have an online YouTube video called Deep Look. They're really fun. They're like for kids. They do 5-minute intensives. And we did one on acorn weevil. So they did this, I helped them collect acorns, and then they did this really fun video on their feeding behavior. And they're super cool. So I would check it out if you're interested in that stuff. Mistletoe, right, again, hemiparasitic, just kind of the factor of old trees or deciduous trees, not a serious issue. Fire can be good for controlling mistletoe, right? It's very sensitive to fire. Storm damage, I get this one a lot, like what's wrong with my tree? It's like the branch broke from the wind. Just printed out. Right, dieback and decline. Trees don't have a termination gene, right? We call it, a natural kind of pace toward mortality, we call it senescence. In trees, under ideal conditions, they would just grow forever and ever and ever. We call it demographic senescence. And sometimes, which means that environmental factors just put tons of pressure on trees and eventually it just overwhelms their ability to persist, especially when they get older and they're bigger, and so they have it's more effort to shunt resources around. So sometimes trees are just dying, right? They get old, and that's just part of the natural cycles that they'll die back. This could be somebody saying, oh, look, it's mob. Like, no, those trees are just, lots of native insects are feeding them as they fade out from age. And then this one, I was like, oh, mob. And then I looked, and that pad on the house was brand new. So damage from development, cutting roots. I can't tell you how many times I go to a site visit and like, what's wrong with my tree? It's like, you cut half of the roots off of the tree. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? So yeah, the things we do in urban spaces. And then real quick, this is really important, invasive shot hole borers. Primarily, for a long time, we're just like, hey, a Southern California issue. Just a few months ago, we found it in San Jose. They found shot hole borers in Santa Cruz. This turns out to be a new species, so now there's 3 species of shot hole borers. These are cousins to Mediterranean oak borer. They vector fusarium, right? So they have semitic fungi, they vector fusarium, a huge host list, a lot of urban species, including oaks. They have interesting infestation dynamics. The point is, these are here. I have some resources at the end. I would definitely look up this insect and start paying attention to it because it's on our doorstep. Very similar to mob, kind of like the same dynamics, more aggressive. Gold spot oak borer. I don't know how many have heard of that. This is a pest in Southern California. It's not a bark beetle, it's a buprestid. But when we do kind of the risk modeling, we basically see its primary host is coast live oak, black oak, but we see that it basically has the potential to spread across the entire range of coast live oak and black oak in California, right? So it's just a matter of time before it starts to pop up here. D-shaped exit holes. That's why I said if you see D-shaped exit hole on a coast live oak or California black oak, then that's concerning. So a really good resources. So the Field Guide to Insects and Diseases in California, can't recommend enough the work that Ted and Elizabeth did. They also manage the California Oak Disease and Arthropod Database, or CODA. We're currently updating that, and we're also working on updating this printout. Really great resource. They cover basically everything you would ever need to know. We have a website for MOB for Mediterranean Oak borer and MOBPC, so Mediterranean Oak borer pestcomplex.org. There's also one for UC called iShop.org for the iShop, the invasive shot hole borers. Both are really good points of information for just general knowledge about the insect, but also for best management practices and documents for clientele and dealing with pests in different systems. And then a lot of the information on books we have across the board is on UCOs. So, went through that real quick. I'm done. Questions?
Can you share your PowerPoint with us?
I can.
Okay, why don't you send it to Vermeer or Rose?
Okay.
How about those on Zoom? You guys have any questions?
I've got kind of a big one for you, Mike. You mentioned BMPs, right? And I've heard like sanitation practices, but how about like the timing of all this stuff, right? Like you talked about chipping and burning being effective means to controlling, the borer and the white oak. And then we talked about sods and there's the factor of tree vitality. I mean, when we're cutting into these trees and these oaks in the winter, right, to avoid nesting season, are we basically cutting a bunch of cavities into the trees? And then when we're chipping in the winter, are we spreading sods? Is it better to do this stuff in the summer? And then I wonder the timing of the pile burning. If we're fumigating these oaks during a certain season, is it more beneficial than in others? Some sort of scheduling of these activities, I think, could be pretty beneficial, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's pest specific, right? We typically want to manage for insects in the winter because they're dormant and they're just hanging out in the trees. They're not flying. The worst time of year to manage for insects is when they're emerging from the tree, right? If you're cutting a tree down, then you're going to sanitize, but their adults are emerging. The fecund or reproductively viable adults are emerging. You're not really doing much. So like hitting the life stages when they're least likely to spread is really crucial. So insects when they're dormant, sod, you don't want to be cutting and doing tree management when it's warm and wet out in mud. You want to do it when it's dry. burning, I mean, I don't wanna really be doing a lot of heat stress to deciduous oaks at bud break or at bud expansion. So yeah, I think there is a really important timing consideration when thinking about managing pests, but also unintentionally creating additional stresses that will weaken trees for future infestations. I think these are all really important things to think about. And yeah, I think I have yeah, just when the particular pest is not active, and that means a lot of different things, which maybe is a pest by pest or case by case conversation, right? Because not always is that line up with the funding cycles or when people are available or when other regulations kind of prohibit activity. So yeah, it can be a challenging space to work in.
Good, any other questions, folks? All right, Michael, thank you very much for sharing.
Can I get one more in, Kim? So sorry, I got one. Awesome
Take your time,
presentation, but
Jason.
is it okay if I ask about drought stressed Doug firs and looking at beetles moving into them?
Yeah, well, okay. Oh boy, how much time we got? When
Maybe
we're
that's next.
when we're talking about Doug fir encroachment into habitats that are not high quality sites for the species, I don't see that as the pest complexes, the kind of pest issues that occur in those firs. I don't see that as a true forest health issue. I see that as we remove the most important disturbance and something is filling that void, and what's happening is that fire's not there to pull them out, so they're accumulating, they're stressed. The insects, which their primary role in these ecosystems, to cull out dead dying trees. And so I see them just kind of filling that ecological niche of disturbance. So for me, when I see these, conifer encroaching into like oaks and other ecosystems that aren't really supportive of the soils or those species, I see it as a correcting factor. Of course, it affects fire behavior. There's a lot of complications with that. It's when I see insect issues in high quality Doug fir sites, like on a north slope that's really wet, where they're old growth Doug fir or has the capacity to support old growth Doug fir, that we might consider it a forest health issue, in my opinion, right? I think what's happening is inevitable consequence of fire suppression.
All right.
Yeah,
great.
Mike,
Thank you,
on that.
Mike.
Just thinking about though, when you think about pests and the buildup of pests. So we have these areas with a forest health concern, right? Trees shouldn't probably be there. But that creates a large brooding opportunity, right? And I'd be worried about how having significant numbers of, say, Douglas fir in, drought stressed areas then creates a large brood of insects that can mobilize to areas that historically or are better set for fir, but would be overwhelmed from a large insect population.
Yeah, that's a super valid point and something that I think about with redwood a lot, right? Offsite redwood is pretty common. We love to plant redwood in places where it doesn't belong. At 25, 30 years old, those redwood get, maybe you know this, but there's hundreds of redwood pests, and those trees get heavily infested and infected, and that becomes reservoirs that they can spread to the healthier populations. But I totally agree with you, Jason, that is a challenge, is that we create these, we boost these populations, they can spread to other areas. I guess my mind is the fact that the trees are dying is not the problem, but yeah, the risk that of it spreading to other areas is certainly a challenge.
Yeah, I fully, I hear you. I understand that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Jason, if someone wanted to create a forest health grant, how do you think that would work?
Well, you would basically say there's a bunch of dead trees out here, and
no, you missed my cue. This is the transition.
No, I understand.
Jeez.
I know I'm next.
So we have Jason and Adriana, who led a stellar effort to create a forest health grant application. And they wanted to share their process to doing that and a little bit about the details. So Jason and Adriana, please fire away.
All right, if I can share my screen.
You should be able to, yes.
Go. So, Well, anyway, this is just kind of the easiest way to show where this grant was, because we assembled a grant from multiple partners throughout the county, really trying to diversify the types of work that we're going to be doing and the populations that we were affecting, and really broadening the appeal for a forest health grant. So, this being Sonoma County here, all these little dots are roughly where we had, proposed to do work. So some of the high points here is that we had 20 landowners involved in this project. We applied for $5.7 million of on-the-ground work. It's a $7 million total grant application, 1,250 acres. We applied for capacity building funds for project development for Coast Ridge Community Forest, Safer West County, and the Upper Mark West Fire Safe Council. The Friends of the Mark West really are kind of the host of that organization. Fuel treatments that we're looking at: sudden oak death and fuels reduction, especially in this Bohemian Highway project area here. So this is Camp Meeker, Bohemian Highway, Dutchbill Creek. So that was that area. There's oak woodland restoration that's happening really down in this sort of area. And this is all post-fire. This is Calistoga Road and St. Helena Road. Mark West Creek runs right through here. And then we had a little bit of area where the fire actually didn't burn too intensely, but we have oak woodland encroachment into, so Douglas fir encroaching into oak woodlands. So that's part of this. There's reforestation as components to both of these pieces, because we're going to be removing sudden oak death trees and thinning out some of those stands, and then replacing that likely with redwood. There's wood utilization. So we're going to be selling logs, small diameter logs, pretty much as part of this. Some of them will go to the Green Valley mill, and then some of them will be to whatever mill pays us the most. So we'll see how the markets are when it comes time to actually trying to do anything. Right now they're pretty bad, so I'm hoping it gets better. But at any rate, I mean, that's the thing. It's a grant, so it's not really like it is meant to pay for itself. Everything that gets sold and generates revenue, that those funds have to go back into the project. So if we get more money, we can treat more areas. We've got areas over here that are, a lot of this is introduced pine removal. So this area was burned in the Creighton Ridge fire. And as part of that effort, following the 1980, Creighton Ridge fire, they planted a shelterwood crop of pine, and then those pine were never really managed after that. So now we have pine, which is an introduced species in this area, and we're hoping we can sell them for pressure treated lumber, but we'll see. So some of that's
For what type of lumber?
Pressure treated.
Oh.
Yeah. There's only one place that does that. That's Mendocino Redwood. It has a pressure treatment facility for whitewoods. And yeah, so we've got Gallo has been working with Northern Sonoma Fire Protection District, and so has Bob Cooley. These are set up already. They have all of the VTP, and like everything is done, surveys complete, archaeology, everything is just ready to go. So we included these because that was something that the grant is looking for, is like project readiness. So these are just waiting for funding, and these are mastication treatments on these two units. One's sort of near Lake Sonoma and one's near Geyserville. This is work that's come out of a lot of community organizing from the Coast Ridge Community Forest. And so you've got Moorheart Ridge that runs here, and Moorheart Ridge Road. So that's sort of a really important artery for that area of the county. There's an adjacent forest health grant that had been funded right here. So this is contiguous with that work. And then there's Blue Jay Ridge, where there's a number of homes that are off on this area here. And so all of this is going to be pre-treat and prescribed fire. This is, well, actually really all of these, I can't think of anywhere that doesn't have some prescribed fire component involved. But these were really going to be mastication units. This is just a mixed bag. Some of it's mastication, some of it's hand piling and whatnot, but pretty much all of it's going to be followed up with a prescribed fire. And I would say really the same for the Upper Mark West. So I think those were all the highlights for that. Yeah, big thing. I mean, 20 landowners involved, 3 different community organizing groups that are each sort of independently working with their communities to build projects and support for doing fuels management and other forest health related projects. And we convinced them to take sort of their most project cream of the crop, project ready, low hanging fruit, whatever you want to call it, and combine all of these together so that we're sort of getting the best of all of them. And I think we were able to basically check the box for everything that grant has, including like disadvantaged communities. We did every single type of forest health related project that you could check the box for. And it's all on small private landowners, with the exception of one of the properties transitioned from a private land ownership to what is now a public land ownership while we were writing this grant. So the Camp Meeker forest, redwood forest, is now a public ownership. So that'll be really exciting if we end up getting funded, that there actually is a nexus to the public with some of this work. And so people will be able to see really the gamut. I mean, that's going to be mastication, what's the name of the exemption? It's the forest fire prevention exemption, some road work and road improvements that are going to be a part of that exemption. Reforestation, prescribed burning, like basically everything that you would want to see, we're proposing to do on that property. And I'm just excited that if we get funded, we'll have the opportunity to take lots of pictures, make videos. We have a video production budget that was included in there. We're gonna, really try to document the work as it's going along, and I'm hoping that some interpretive signs and information can be made available to people who are visiting that park. So that was that. And I think that's
what's the acreage, Jason, what's the acreage total?
It was 1,250-ish. But most of those acres are being treated multiple times. So there's a prep step of some sort, and then there's prescribed fire is being applied to 90%.
And when will you hear whether you get it?
I don't actually tell you, but we're hoping and guessing April.
Jason, follow-up question. Is this one of those ones where there was an acreage minimum?
They said maybe April, but they didn't tell us.
Yes, there was an acreage minimum. It's 800 acres is the minimum. And, as we wrote in our report, and as all of 60% of forested land in Sonoma County is owned in ownerships that are under 50 acres. So this sort of reflects that. And that's why there's 20 individual ownerships involved, which is a major undertaking. Signatures.
That's astounding. That's good.
We got
Jason, how much
signatures
did you
from
ask
people
for?
involved, commitment. letters, that kind of thing. Adriana, what was that?
That was Molly. She wondered how
Oh,
many,
sorry.
what was the cost, the estimated cost of that grant? Was the
So,
ask?
so on the groundwork was $5.7 million and the total grant is 7. So we asked for the max. We asked for $7 million. I did not think that would be the case, but indirect will sneak up on you really fast.
Yeah.
Okay, last question, anyone? All right, thank you very much, Jason, really appreciate
Oh
it.
yeah, I'm still sharing, sorry.
No worries. Thank you for sharing that information with us, and fingers are crossed. And thank you for your patience on getting through it too. I wanted to transition to our next guest and co-host for this one. Molly Curley O'Brien is with WRA, and she is part of a team that's helping the county figure out exactly how to approach a wildfire resilience program. And so we have been working on this. The purpose, I'm really excited everybody had a good experience last month when we presented a accumulation or essentially the combined efforts of Napa County with Napa Firewise, as well as RIN Wildfire Protection Authority, Prevention Authority, as well as some of our Measure H representatives, specifically Marshall Tuberville and Roberta McIntyre. So it sounded like we got some really nice enthusiasm for that type of work. And the big question, what are we doing here? And so we wanted to kind of give you, and I've shared this kind of in piecemeal about what we're trying to accomplish here in Sonoma County. And so Molly and I are gonna just share a little bit about what progress we've made and how you can play a part of that next step. And so I'm gonna pace down here a little bit to get down to this particular slide, which highlighted what we presented to the Board of Supervisors back in January 2023 as essentially a reorganization chart, thinking about how the different partners could work together to identify how to address landscape management, how to think about wildfire and the house out approach. And then also organizational structure and funding. How does that look? What's the long-term look like? And then also the climate resilient land strategy. So with that, we created this network of different partners. We call them technical advisory committees, where we focused on providing good experience, people who had a really good ground experience on how these types of fuel treatments, for instance, the landscape management. I've been managing that since the program started with the Vegetation Management Grant Program as a way to provide better input about how to manage a program like that. And that led to something bigger that the supervisors are really excited to support. And so with the land management TAC, we also then created the wildfire mitigation TAC, which is going to be led by Carleone Stafford from Permanent Sonoma. Then we have the climate resilient lands TAC, which is now currently being managed by the ERG lead, Lindy Lowe, thank you. And then finally, the organizational funding, long-term funding TAC will be starting up in April, where we're identifying specific people who have excellent experience in developing those Napa Firewise models and the Wildfire Prevention Authority, and have those people participate in our process so we can really think about how does it fit in Sonoma County. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
What we heard last month was fantastic. Those programs are really taking the lead in this realm, but they have very different dynamics than what we have here in Sonoma County. In Marin County, there's a significant amount of federal lands and public lands that can be managed in a way that's very distinct than all the private lands that we have here in this county. Napa Firewise has done an excellent job from a nonprofit base, trying to engage all the different actors, the fire chiefs, the different nonprofit organizations in this realm to really bring more funding to be able to support that effort. So we want to try to poach some of those great ideas and create something that's very specific to Sonoma County, and then look at ways in which we can collaborate with our partners.
Can I just
Yeah.
provide a little clarification? The folks that represent Napa Firewise, Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, those folks are not members of this organizational funding TAC, but the policies, the programs, the frameworks that are implemented by those organizations and entities will be shared during that TAC to conceptualize what that looks like within Sonoma County. Just wanted to make that
That's
clear.
great.
So Marin's authority will be part of
They will
that?
not, they will not.
And
They're gonna
Napa
be,
Firewise won't be.
correct, they
Okay.
will be interviewed
Yeah.
as a
Okay.
subject matter expert as part of this, but they're not gonna be part of this recurring TAC that's gonna
Okay,
meet
and will you
over.
be dealing with private investments?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we want to have everything, all the spaghetti on the wall, trying to figure out exactly what would be an appropriate funding source that we can tap into. And so that's the analysis we want to do. But I think one of the bigger pictures we want to encapsulate is trying to figure out what we've done here in Sonoma County. How well has it functioned on a wide variety of landscapes? Regional parks plays a huge role in managing public lands. Ag and Open Space has its different projects as well. But then Permit Sonoma is implementing the FEMA grants. How well has that functioned for us as a county? And how can we glean all the lessons learned from the veg management grant, from all these different initiatives to figure out the best way to do it Sonoma County style.
And you're gonna also look at what's missing, what.
Yes, absolutely.
besides
That
of the
gap
good stuff that
analysis.
is happening, you're gonna look for things that could be, really valuable.
That's right. And the science behind it, how do we justify where we should be prioritizing our work? And then that's also what Measure H is doing, how that fits into this picture, so. But beyond that, it's absolutely essential that we seek outreach to these different communities that are ultimately going to be impacted by this type of work. And so we're at that phase now where we're starting to daylight this process, but also reaching out to different organizations. And this is a key body for input for this type of work. And so you all are engaged in some type of forest management activity, forest health activity. There's some great examples that we've heard just today about all the things that are going on in this county. And so this is a key group for us to seek input on. And so I wanted to have Molly be able to share some of the outreach efforts that we are currently engaging in. And if you are not part of the members that are participating as team partners, we really want you to be part of that process. So with that, page down to the
Sure.
Where do you want to go?
Well,
Just to give you
how
some
much time do we
sense,
have?
we have 3 more minutes.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll go to
Dee, I had, just to your point and to your question around needs and not just looking at what's working, but also where the gaps are, I wanted to make sure that there are some identified needs that are percolating as part of the tax that are already starting to meet, for example, the landscape management tax. So just to speak to that really quickly before I go into the teaming partner part. So there's about 5 high-level needs that have been identified as part of these tax dialogues and discussions thus far. And, maybe it makes sense for me to come back and to have a more rich dialogue around how this resonates with you. But just to share it, there's a need for a robust approach to encourage private landowners to want to increase of understanding of both land steward and climate risks in the region, and then also be able to encourage them to implement that wildfire resilience activity on their property. There's a need for more resources and capacity for organizations participating in these resilience projects and programs. This should not be a shock to anybody that's hearing that. In addition to that, we've been hearing that there's a need for more workforce programs to train and grow a skilled local labor force. Yes, at the beginning, but also in a perpetual pipeline as well to continue to hone skills. A need for a single point of communication for outside county entities to inquire about ongoing programs and projects and plans. Who to reach out to when they have a question around what they might be able to do in a different county that remains unclear. And then a need for streamlined coordination to pursue more funding opportunities together. So the Forest Health grant proposal that Adriana and Jason spoke to is an example of that streamlined coordination, and where are there other opportunities? And how can that just be a best practice moving forward, that coordination is just taking place at every turn? So I wanted to just share that this is happening, right? That there's things that are happening within it to identify those needs, which is excellent. And again, we can have a more rich conversation about how that resonates with you
Please, yes, please.
later, but that sort of leads to this idea of these focus groups. So in addition to all of this work that we're doing within these technical advisory committees, be it a landscape management TAC or a climate resilient lands TAC, we are also going to be asking folks to attend focus groups. Now that is for someone who is not currently on a TAC. Now, perhaps they have a colleague at an organization that is part of a TAC, but we want to make sure that all the folks who are touching this type of work are participating in this project in some way, shape, or form, and the focus group gets to that. So the focus groups are going to take place this spring, where we are going to be essentially bringing those needs, that preliminary slide that I shared just now, plus all of the other findings that we're going to be gleaning in the coming months from the other TACs, to hear from them what resonates, what they think is working about what's been shared, what's they're missing, what's not working, and then, ideating together around what a streamlined, coordinated structure could look like for this county, Sonoma County style, like Kim likes to say. There's a couple of ways we're going to be doing that. The teaming partners are Goldridge RCD, Fire Safe Sonoma, Sonoma Ecology Center, and Locien. And these esteemed teaming partners that we are so grateful for their partnership and help are going to be facilitating specific focus groups for specific types of organizations. So it's not going to be everybody under the sun under one particular roof and together. We're going to make sure that we are curating a structured list of questions and ideas to solicit specific feedback from underrepresented communities, from environmental education organizations that work with youth, for example, to landowners, to fire safe councils. Those types of groups inherently require a different type of question and a different type of approach. And so we are working with those teaming partners to do just that. Oh, are there any questions? That was it.
There's questions, but we'd like you to do that.
Let's come back next time.
Yeah, it would be terrific.
Yeah.
I think the idea was to just show some continuity, that we heard a great download from different programs in other counties, and I was chomping the bit to take a piece at that moment, but it just seemed like it made more sense to just start to be able to share and daylight some of the work that's going on behind the scenes, and how other people can participate in a greater way. And so those are scheduling. We're currently in the process of scheduling next TAC meetings, as well as these outreach events where people can really get a good download about what's going on and what you see as a really important factor that may be missing, or as Dee mentioned, these gap analysis, trying to understand if there's a specific area that's very vulnerable to wildfire and communities that are below that area. What are we doing to be able to encourage new organizations to work in that area, or support activities that are happening in other realms? Could it be a fire safe council in that area? It might be regional parks. It could be a driving point there or something like that. So there's a lot of different models that are going through this, and we really want to make sure we get lots of input on what we should do next. Chris, you have your hand up.
Okay, you called on me? So Molly, this may be obvious, but maybe I'll just take a moment to say it. I really appreciated that Kim and his office organized a recent event for conservation easement participants. Most of the nonprofits, community-based organizations are either geographically based or they have a particular kind of constituency. What was interesting in what Kim recently organized was to try to bring together conservation easement parcel people together from across the county that aren't necessarily part of any particular geographical area or a particular community group. That seems to me already a well-positioned and interested, committed group that exists, but it's an informal grouping. So I would call that an important stakeholder group to reach out to. Again, maybe obvious, maybe not so obvious. We've got the Sonoma Land Trust Conservation Easement people. We have Ag and Open Space Conservation Easement people. We have Bodega Land Trust Conservation Easement people. So we got 3 entities with their own conservation easement. When we bring them all together, the cross-sharing and learning across that group is pretty important.
That's a great comment. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. All right, go ahead, Dee.
I think also to reach out to the adjacent parcel owners of these conservation easements and of the public lands in the county. This is ripe. These people are ripe, and I've been saying this for maybe 30 years, when I asked the state parks, well, are you reaching out to your, neighbors? And there is not a formal, I don't even know how much there is of that, but that could just be a dynamic extension of our work.
Absolutely, yeah. Good. Well, with the remaining time, I'm gonna go ahead and stuff the ballot box here because we have one more presentation today, and it's again another very exciting tool that we wanted to share with you. And this is thanks to Alex Rowe and Topo Collective, who's been under contract with us to be able to help us design a website that, asked by the Board of Supervisor, how can we do a website that is geared towards landowners and allows them to do choose their own adventure on what kind of support they need. There's a lot of different websites out there, a lot of different organizations trying to provide a resource for a variety of different people. And so we wanted to create this website to help them create the links, all right? And so Alex, do you mind going through and sharing the website? And so we've been doing these soft launches and trying to get some feedback from various people like the RCDs and our own staff, just to get feedback on how this plays out. But what we want to do now is we're moving into the hard launch, and we really want people to start using this tool and give us feedback based on their own experience with it. So I'll go ahead and make this larger so you can see it.
You're seeing the website right now, Kim? Everybody seen that?
Yeah, go for it. Cool. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Kim. So this is going to be super brief. Kim is going to send out a survey after this, and a login for the website. So right now the website's live. It's behind a password. So you'll get a password and access to the website, and then a quick little survey so you can send input. You're also welcome to send it directly to me or to Kim. I'm Alex Rowe, for those of you I haven't met. I'm just going to give a quick run through in the last couple minutes here, and then we'll look forward to your feedback. I think Kim said everything I wanted to say in terms of sort of setting the stage for the reason behind this site. It's kind of intended to be a resource hub for all kinds of good content, and also just kind of an information source for people who are exploring this area. So I'm gonna fly through this. Apologies, I'm gonna try and get this done in the next 3 minutes, and then happy to follow up with anybody who would like. All right. Landing page, a little bit of a background, talks about the CLE report, which is kind of the foundational document here. This is an interactive web map that Kim's shop has put together, talks about projects, talks about some of the data behind the work. A little bit of and again, this is all up for discussion and review. So please, if you are willing, take the time. We're in that wordsmithing phase. So if you have specific comments about specific language, now would be a great time. So a little bit of background here, imagery that will be updated to reflect a specific project or two. And then basically there's sort of 2 main sections of the site. The first is events and workshops. And this is intended to be kind of a one-stop shop for actual events and actual workshops. We've got current, past, and then archived. Archived is basically anything that's more than a couple months back. And so on the site, we have a nice little platform that makes it easy for our team or Kim's team or anybody on the project team to update, add events, add links to those events, add a little bit of background, get people excited. And then same thing, you know, to have previous events that maybe have relevant information that you still want to have a link to be able to share it. It can all kind of live here. Similarly, we'll have archived events that go farther back that maybe we don't want to get rid of, but we don't need front and center. So that's that. And then I'm just going to fly through the about page. This is just a little bit of background, highlighting some of the focus areas, leadership, mission, vision, partnering agencies. Again, all things that can be adjusted after your review. Contact, very basic. Basically, this is trying to steer people to share new events, new resources, or update links. The main event, though, this is for a collection of resources. And so the idea here is we've collected, I think we're up to 90 something resources. This will grow over time. Presumably some may come off the list, but hopefully it's mostly growing. And it's intended to be as simple a way for anybody in the county to find resources that are actually applicable to their situation. So as an example, we're going to grab, I'm a landowner with 1 to 10 acres. That's filtering already. So it's taking our list of 90 something, and I don't know, we probably still have 40 or 50 here. And I'm looking for funding. So if I do that, now I'm presented with just four items that our team has assessed as being relevant for landowners of 1 to 10 acres who are looking for funding. So we've got this matrix of these different categories. Again, this is still up for discussion, right? If there's categories that are missing, if there's like ways of slicing and dicing the county that aren't represented, we want to know. And then importantly, if you just leave these as blank selections, that's our entire list. It'd be great to find out if there's other resources that we should be adding to this website. I'm going to stop there and see if Kim, if there's anything that I missed in that very abbreviated overview. Anything you want me to hit on?
I wish you didn't take so much time, Alex. Come on.
I know,
now.
brutal. I know.
So again, this is our opportunity to just launch this. I'll send you the link to the website and the password, and then please provide as much feedback as you'd like to either want you to send them to me, and then Alex and I can discuss how to improve it. Okay. So thank you, Alex, for sharing that time, and I really appreciate you all the work that you've been doing so far. And then Adriana or Jason, you got a chance to take a look at this? Any other things that you wanted to share with us?
Well, I've had a chance to look it over with you and Alex, and I think it's great. And no, I think I'm just excited for us to have a one-stop shop for so many resources. I think one thing I want to work with you all on is the overlap between the county's website and the Forest Working Group website, which has also been like a resource hub containing a lot of resources and educational documents. And so just thinking about maybe we retire that side of our Forest Working Group website and we just let the county's website be the new repository, something like that. I just we'll have to work on what how we want to handle that overlap, but I think it's great and it's really beautiful, and I think it represents us like as a community really well to our private landowners.
I think going into the design of all this, our intention was never to forego or outpower any other website. It really was to try to provide a link to other websites and make it a little bit more organizationally friendly to a landowner who is just inundated by all these different sources of information. And so how do we kind of consolidate that down so it's not so overwhelming? We hear this constantly about the biggest challenge for most landowners that they don't know where to start. And so we really want to provide those linkages that if they have less than 10 acres, they have a general idea of what might be able to.
So you do have that category.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Right,
and I think that's exactly what I meant too, Kim. I think the working group website has like tried to support a need. And now that the county's website is here, I feel like we have that support. So that's really great. And just like that.
Fantastic. Well, sorry we went over time a little bit. We really appreciate everyone's presentation. Thank you, Mike, for being able to share with us pest and disease control. And thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your input. All right, and you can see we have like maybe 15 in the room today. It could get bigger. We have hosted a lot of meetings in the past in our facilities. And so there are some delicious snacks. So if that's the incentive you need, by all means, come on in next time.